Yeah, I'll start now.
Right, we're getting underway.
Yeah, no, she's listening.
Yeah, because she rang me quickly and I got told.
Yeah, I just talked to her before.
Good.
You were from. Yeah.
You do that.
Right, welcome everybody to this workshop of the Central District Council, and we've got a couple of items to work through: annual plan budgets and the water service operations and maintenance contract. We're going to start with the annual plan budgets. This is a bit of a first for this council, as I recall. Don't think we've ever had our workshop sessions in public before, so we are in a public forum, and we're also being live streamed. So just to remind everybody about what the workshop's about. There will be no decisions today. What we've got is a couple of items that the staff are bringing to us for us to provide some guidance and some thoughts on, maybe clarify some things. So be careful we don't start saying we're going to just. We are simply providing feedback and advice and answering questions. The formal decision making will be when the report on the annual plan comes back to us in due course. So as long as we remember that, we should be all good. Saskia and the team are going to take us through it all. I said there's all sorts of people here from council departments today, so look at me. Might be a bit daunting. So Saskia will pass over to you, and just to confirm though, Tracy's online.
She's listening, yeah.
And is Tim appeared, or is he still?
No, he's still not appeared yet, but it's going to be fast.
Yeah, we are expecting His Worship to join us as soon as he can after his meetings in Wellington. So Saskia, hand over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time to go through this annual plan. A series of slides that we have sent out to you. We're going to go through it in turn. You see, we have got quite a few staff here in case you have detailed technical questions that the GMs can't answer. We will throw it to our expertise that is surrounding us. So I'll hand it to Vibhuti, who's going to do most of the talking. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. And I just want to give you a bit of a picture about how the presentation is going to look. So the way it's structured is that rather than keep the big suspense of your revenue to the end and talk about expenses first, we'll talk about your rates. The revenue source for council, rates increase. And then we'll jump into what's causing that rates increase. So, you know, what are the factors that are impacting that and what the drivers are. Before getting into the specifics of what this financial situation is here for you all, we'll just give a bit of an idea of what's happening in the NZ economy, which I'm sure all of you are well aware of, but it would just be good to have that, you know, that it's not just Central Otago that's getting impacted by this, it is all of New Zealand, and indeed, for some matters, it's right across the world. So yeah, with that, thank you, Wayne. Right, so the external on the New Zealand economy. We know about inflation, we know about cost of goods, we know about cost of living. All of these things are having a big impact overall, and so Central Otago is no exception to that. There are huge infrastructure cost escalations, and this is just even on 1 year. Bridges, roads, water supply, which is of course your biggest areas of cost for council, all are getting impacted by that inflation bullet point on top. Interest costs, we know that cost of funds. When we were doing RLTPs in 2021 and projecting those in 2020, we were talking about a recession. And of course, the numbers and the cost of funds in most long-term plans would have been setting about 4 to 5%. It was 1.9 here. Cost of funds today for this council are somewhere around 6%. So, you know, that's the impact on your interest costs. Affordability, of course, is now becoming an issue. So you've got to, as you always do, turn your mind to it. And we've had, because of those concerns, we've had to do living wage adjustments. And that's just one of the factors of a variety of things that we've had to do. So those are some very high level external influences. And like I said, this is for all districts, all cities, all New Zealand, and indeed when it comes to things like insurance. Next one, thank you. Some specific matters for Central Otago. We said we can expect electricity renewal to have a big jump. This is actually, once again, it's a New Zealand-wide factor as well, but of course it is impacting our budgets here. And we would just talk specific numbers when we get into the numbers. You know, the requirements you've heard from Julie, I'm sure, a few times on this. There are requirements coming through from the water regulator, and that is driving the need for action. And of course, we told you the costs are quite high when it comes to infrastructure, and that's the impact you're having. There are risks around your bridges. That's what's showing up in the numbers. And of course, we've had, and once again, right across New Zealand, skill shortages in a variety of areas, and that's reflected in the use of consultants, etc. Okay. So those are just influences, more overarching things on your numbers, specific to Central Otago and our financials here. I just before I kick into this, this council made a decision 3 weeks ago that we were going to go with an annual plan instead of a long-term plan, which I think was a good decision that you made. There are a lot of changing factors in there, and that is impacting your numbers. So we've had to crunch these really quickly, pull back on, pull in all the waters numbers, which are out when you first saw them, when you first saw your financials in November, I think. So here's where we are. Your rates increase is your first line. It's a revenue source. Your rates increase is sitting at 25.49%. It is a large number, but once again, is reflective of what's happening around the country. I don't think there is any council that is going into single digits. I might be wrong there, but most are sitting in the double-digit numbers. I think that's all I'll say about the slide. We'll come back to rates after you looked at what's causing the rates increases. Thank you. This is just to give you an idea of breakup, and once again, you're going to see that in your cost. So we'll delve into the activities in the cost space first. That's where you'll see where the increases are coming from, and they're of course reflected back into your rate. So we won't dwell on these slides yet. We can come back to these if you've got questions once you've seen where the expenses are flowing through. So when we'll probably go through the next few quickly, yeah. And yeah, so let's go into what's driving that 25% or the 11 million increase that you're seeing in your rates increase. We've tried to put them into buckets just so you can get a better idea of you know, where the direct cost increases are and then what overheads of various types are hitting your different activity areas. So there's a breakup of where the increases are. If you look at that variance to current year, which is your blue column just before second to last, you're seeing that your overall increases are 3.42 million. That number is a little bit masked by the fact that cost of sales is your cost of land development, basically. That's just masking the actual increase, which is the 9.91, and that's why you're seeing that line there. Is that okay? Do you want what I'm talking about?
So just to clarify then, that increase of 9.91 million accounts for 16 of the 25%.
What that 9.91% is saying, that your actual increase in operating costs from last year to this year is 9.91 million or 10 million if you take away the sales. Yeah. And that is a 16% increase.
Yeah, so that's 16 of the total increase.
No, that's 16% increase on current year.
Okay,
So it's just that if you look at the 3.42 number and you go, oh, that's not a huge increase in our costs. I'm just saying that that is masked by the fact that you have got cost of land development, which is matched by income that you do when you sell land. So if you just discount that, your actual increase in cost is 2 million from last year to this year, and actually 26% on what you had planned 3 years ago. Yeah. Okay. So the increases, of course, the main increase or the largest one is in interest cost in percentage terms. And so interest costs, usually we know that. But the second big one, of course, is corporate overhead. So that's around things like valuation costs, insurance costs, that's where those sit. And then you've got your direct cost increases.
so those increases in interest increase reflects starting from a low base and starting, so the percentage is high, but the quantum is not.
That's right. That interest cost is reflective of the fact that you've now got a 25 million loan, which you probably didn't have 2 years ago, I think. It's reflective of the fact that your cost of borrowing was factored in at 1.9% and is actually sitting at 6% now. So that's what that is showing. And also internal interest. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that one there is just a pie to show you where the percentage increases are, how that 10 million that we're talking about in terms of increase in costs, how do those sit across the various cost areas? Just to give you an idea of percentages. So of course we would expect to see a large increase in direct costs, and see how you're nearly 30% on your depreciation increase. So that is your valuation showing you that to renew these assets in the future, the cost of these assets is now higher, so depreciating at a higher rate.
Can we change the depreciation, or is that set in stone? It's coming up later.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can to an extent. So there are two things that you do in depreciation. There is a depreciation that is calculated on the basis of valuation that is done by an external agency, or in some cases, and others we might be doing it internally. But that is what we tend to call in the financial world your depreciation expense, right? And then you fund that expense and you go, okay, whether or not. So let's just say 10 million of depreciation. Are we going to fund all of this 10 million, or do we think there is some play, which is your question, Councillor? So you're asking, do we have to fund all of this depreciation or not? This council has a policy, I think it is written somewhere, that you fund to the extent of what your renewals profile is, which is prudent to do at least. And so at least you must at least do that much, and then how much over that is probably an area. So there is a slide that is saying you've got some leeway there. It is of course prudent financial management to do all of your depreciation funding, because there is going to come a time where you're going to have to renew that asset. And at that time, you will need some money. So if you've kept it away over the years, you'll be able to utilize it, which is the simple logic of depreciation.
That's our problem here, is we haven't depreciated our roads to the last wee while, and now our roads are part of our road infrastructure, our bridges, and we haven't got the funds that have been depreciated.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but we have depreciated roads to 49%, maybe not just the bridges component.
Yes, just wanted to clarify that. It was the 1990s that started depreciating.
Yeah,
And of course, your bridges were built
in the
about 50
1950s.
years ago now. So yeah, you haven't got 100 years of nice accumulated
And
depreciation.
that would change the whole long-term block if we did.
Yeah, and you didn't actually start, when you started funding depreciation on roading, you did roading excluding bridges.
Yeah.
So your bridges, now that they're coming up for replacement, you don't have that
Yeah.
that orchard's there.
Yeah.
And
Should have been on council earlier.
no, but once again, it's not unique to this council. There is always a difference between what depreciation charged versus depreciation funding, and that is to do with, what do you think is the payment level, what you should appreciate to whatever your expense is. And so-
Sorry, just to go back on roading depreciation, my recollection is right, that roading depreciation equals our capital expenditure program for roading.
No, your road depreciation is typically meant your actual depreciation expense minus the subsidy you would expect.
Yes, yeah.
And the excluding bridges, and you actually started depreciating bridges about 3 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
But the amount we, for depreciation on our roading network was less than 0.1% was what we used. We funded that and then spent that on the roads.
And then
Yeah.
your renewal program,
Yeah.
because most of your roading assets don't have that long a life,
Yeah.
typically you invest in it.
You are doing that across all of your asset areas as well. You are funding your renewals from your depreciation. So,
That's the terminology I want to use, thank you.
yeah, sure. So that, I guess the point is there is some financial risk if you don't fund all of your charged depreciation. So yes, it is a lever that you've got, but if you do that, then the likes of bridges can come at some later point. Exactly what happened with the bridges. At some point, there was that decision that said we won't depreciate our bridges, and that came to roost.
And now it's coming to the end. And I guess the valuation of our assets is done independently. And if the cost of replacing a bridge has gone up 38%, how much less than the capital value of our assets is it going up if we've got a new water treatment plant in problem?
So we revalue annually.
Yeah.
For roading and for 3 waters. And so we do try to build those in, and I think at your whole, I think it was about a 37% increase in value a couple of years ago. And we didn't actually fund that depreciation immediately because we funded the renewal, we left the renewal program as it was, we didn't uplift the renewal program. So that was post in LTP, and that was to be reviewed when we came into the next LTP.
So I guess we're funding depreciation of inflation, interest, and the extra cost of the assets looking down the line.
We will be going forward if you choose to fund all it.
Triple whammy, isn't it?
But it was kind of, we were in it was just for 3 waters, I think, that we decided not to fund that depreciation in that year. And that was because we were in this transition period where we didn't really know what was happening.
A lot of councils chose that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the auditors are really hot on what value you're attaching to your assets. And actually, this council is in a really good space that you're doing it annually. Most councils do their big assets on a 3-yearly basis. But what the auditors do want is every year you've done some sort of a fair value assessment. So they want that done independently. I've been around and doing discussions with auditors. You have to go out and get ours tested to see whether it fit the value.
And that's why we went to annual, because we were in so many robust discussions with our auditors around what our fixed asset register increased value had been, that we decided it was just cheaper and easier to audit.
Yeah.
To redo the valuation annually and keep us on top of those two. And then we don't get into debates with auditors every year about whether we've done it.
Yeah, and I guess the reason for you to spend a little bit of time on this is just because depreciation is nearly 20 million of your cost. It's 15 million in your rates of 50 million. You're talking about more than 1/5 of it, more than 20% sits in there. It's a big cost.
Well, the two of them, interest and depreciation, because we're effectively paying interest on depreciation as well. Because the capital value's gone up, we have to fund that gap, correct?
You spend the money. You don't have to pay interest until you spend the money, and you.
But we're gonna, I guess what I'm saying in my brain, and correct me if I'm wrong, that because the asset has gone up, in future, we're gonna have to borrow that money down the road in 10 years' time. We're gonna pay interest on it, so we're actually gonna have to technically budget for interest on the appreciated value of an asset 5 years down the road.
No, the way we're doing this, the way you're doing it is you are saying this asset, its value
Yeah.
is X.
Yeah.
We are going to depreciate it today and we are going to keep that money.
Yeah.
So we won't have to borrow that in the future. So that's what you're doing. You aren't double dipping there.
And your interest costs you've got, or you're holding the money till you spend it, will go off if you do need to borrow, which would be a separate thing anyway, you actually.
Yeah.
Should be future proofing yourself, and that's why you do your revaluations every year, so you keep on top of it.
Yeah.
It's never a straight like for like
No,
though.
no.
When you replace something, you typically improve it to a better standard and that's what you, and yeah. Each fund.
Okay, so
If you did do, just take that one step further, if you did do like for like,
You will never catch up.
you'll never catch up, and you'll have stuff that's third world technology or whatever, and you'll still be driving on gravel roads in the Manapara. Like you are.
We do value at today's payment.
Yeah.
So if the pipe materials changed over
Yeah.
time, we don't value to replace a galvanised pipe with another galvanised pipe. We replace it with today's materials, but there's still an uplift.
That's why we don't lose lead pipes anymore.
yeah,
Probably not.
part of your increase in depreciation is exactly that. There is a big lift in depreciation, about $4 million, I think, roughly. And that is for the fact that your assets are getting valued at a much higher cost now. So their replacement cost, or the ICs determined, you do use ODIC, you don't do. So that's the optimized.
And that's a good thing.
cost.
That's a
Yeah,
good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it is. And you have to keep up with that. So that is a big cost area for council. Depreciation is the area to look at. We have looked at it. It's not completely tidy yet. We're still working through some of those. But there is some, you need to give us some direction further on. So that's the expense pie chart. Moving into, so thank you, Wayne, next one. Okay, so I think what we do here is that little bullet point there, which will not be a huge surprise to anybody, is that of your increase in rates, the majority of it is coming from, or increase in costs, the majority of it is coming from Three Waters and transport. And so what we do is we go into each activity and just talk a little bit about where the increases are coming from and what was done to try and mitigate some of those increases in each one of the areas. I think somewhere we have said this in the slides, is that when we brought Waters in and reran the numbers late February, when you decided to go into annual plan, we were looking at 20 million rates increase. So that was roughly about 46%. So there has been a huge amount of work that's gone into what are the drivers? Do we need to increase it by this much? What else can we do to reduce that down? So that's what we are to, all four of the teams will go to when the next one. Yeah. So we'll start with Waters.
So obviously we've had some big increases this current year. So when we look at the increase between what the budget is this year and what the budget is that we're proposing next year, a lot of that increase is actually what came to you in a report last month about that cost increase. So the percentage looks particularly high because of that. So you can see that I've split this out into what's already been approved through this year, which you're going to get again next year, and then the addition for next year on top of this year. So wastewater, of course, a big driver in there is the sludge budget. One of the things that we have done this for the annual plan is we've actually pushed out. We had programmed to desludge another pond next year and to do them annually. We've pushed that out a year, which has taken $500,000 out, just to try to get this down a bit lower. the level of increase. So we are taking a bit of risk there. And of course, otherwise it's hitting us big time in the three water space, and particularly in wastewater, is the electricity cost increases that'll come when the contract gets extended. So that 240,000 is, yeah, so that electricity is 178,000 of that.
So how much?
$178,000 on electricity next year. So part of that, we're actually anticipating an increase in cost of our electricity of around 40 to 42%. But then when we bring in additional treatment processes like the nitrogen removal for Cromwell, I had to budget that into next year. So what I've actually done is to get these down, is gone back and said, well, what month of the year will Cromwell be finished? And I'm assuming it's going to take us 9 months to build it. So I've actually only budgeted in for 3 months of increased electricity, but there's line charges as well have got to be added in.
So the only thing we can control any cost of is actually the time or the value or whether we roll out the sludge pit. So the rest of it's out of our control.
I've already pushed that sludge out for you. The sludge is the stuff that's coming out of Alexandra every day. The sludge has to be removed from the Alexandra treatment plant because it doesn't have ponds. It doesn't sit there until you come along. It has to be removed every day. And the cost of dealing with that and taking it to landfill have just gone skyrocketing.
So something like electricity, to be mentioned nearly 200,000 in there. To that point, across council is something like 500,000. So that's your uplift in just that one cost of it. So it is, there are increases that are beyond control, yes, absolutely.
We've also had increases in our operational costs, which I talked to you about in previous council reports with the contract that got renegotiated. So we are looking at options to try to manage that in the future, because we can actually see that these costs are going to continue on a very steep trajectory unless we start to look at how we do things differently. But we can't make those changes fast enough to impact next year. It's likely to be the year after. Otherwise, we're carrying an awful lot of risk that we wouldn't be ready to do the work and then implement the changes. We take the money out, but the change can't be implemented that fast.
So to give, excuse me, to give this some context, not just wastewater, this question will also relate to water as well.
It will relate to water. So, like, for example, we've got a budget this year for $870,000 for all of our wastewater operational work that goes through the building improvement contract. To give you some, sorry, throwing people, but to give you some context, that's less than we spend on gravel road grading in the district alone as part of the roading. So it's abysmally low budget. So these percentages look really high. Of that 870, 263,000 is just to do the sampling work that's required to meet all of these conditions. So we are looking at options around how can we deliver that work more cost effectively, but we can't just go like that and suddenly have an alternative arrangement in place where we might have to resource up to deliver that work instead of outsourcing it. So
to get the context about, we weren't going to be doing this year.
no,
And we weren't going to be doing waters next year. But the question I've got is that had the reforms gone through as planned, these costs would have been getting picked up by the same people, but from a different invoice.
These costs would have still increased.
Yes.
Probably be increasing faster, I would suggest. But they would have been being picked up by a much broader base because we have a low ratepayer base, small cost increase. Whereas if you spread that cost across rate of population incentives like Christchurch, you get a much lower impact.
But either way, these cost increases would have come through under the previous legislation. And now the benefits that might have brought aren't going to happen, and now they're all going to happen here. And so there still would have been a cost increase, just that
Regardless.
the quantum has changed because of the economies of scale that we don't have, that we might have got through the previous legislation.
May.
That's what I said, might have. Yes, I said might have. But we didn't actually know for
A
sure.
lot of it, we're beating ourselves up and costs are out of our control.
Yeah.
Like really, that's the guts of it. And then what are we frightened for? We can't change those. So we're not, we're beating ourselves up. Just get on what we can change. If we can. Generate.
So water is similar. The water cost increases because water actually has a higher baseline cost already. The percentage increases don't look as bad as they do for wastewater, which is a much smaller budget to start with. But we've already come to you in at the last meeting with that $450,000 cost increase that's happened this current year. There's actually more costs that we've been trying to absorb that we won't be able to continue to absorb next year that'll come through as well. So of another 296,000. So I'll give you an example of that. It's costing us an extra $15,000 a month for the new Lake Dunstan water supply treatment plant operations. Well, this year I've only had to budget for 8 months of that, but next year I've got another 4 months to add in. So there's another 60,000 just like that. Once again, electricity cost increases coming through. To give you a bit of context around that, the Lake Dunstan water supply treatment plant, we weren't able to put it on our current contract that we had. We had to, because it was outside of contract conditions, we had to buy that electricity at the high current rate. Our entire budget for water, for electricity, was $450,000 a year. The Lake Dunstan water supply we're estimating that's around $390,000 a year to run for the electricity for that. So, these increased treatment processes come at much higher operating costs, plus the cost of the electricity's gone up, and that's how we know it's going to be around 42%.
Hey. So, keen experience. You would have noticed on that first table, our area doesn't have huge uplifts, and that's because this year in particular, we've had quite a focus on, I guess, new technology and changing the way that we do some things. And really that's happened over the last sort of 5 years across all of our functions with pools, parks, libraries, customer services. And just to remind the council, some of the things that we have done is we've changed the chemicals that we use in our pools to something different, which across all of our pools has saved us about $80,000 in operating costs by using sodium bisulfate instead of using CO2. And fun fact, obviously there's no CO2 that sort of is in New Zealand anymore. It all gets imported, and so the price of that has skyrocketed. So it's little things like that we've made some savings. The Better Off funding that came through council a little while ago, we're in the process right now of putting our FID into our libraries, which means that we don't have some of the individual computer costs that we used to have within our libraries. That's been part of the new system that we're implementing at LAM. And just while we understand how that system is working, a lot of our libraries are getting busier and busier. Cromwell is now our busiest library. It was Vincent for a while, but Cromwell is now our busiest. This year in particular, we will just hold our staff levels to see how our new technology works. And we've also implemented APNK this year, which is a national library software system, which has the ability to charge for sort of any printing and things like that were happening in libraries rather than going through our IT systems and our own IT printing system. So that's been a good way for us to, I guess, understand our costs, but understand how things are being used. And I guess it's a good way just to see how our user pays is operating. And it is aligned with people's memberships and things like that too. We've implemented as a council Genesis Cloud for our customer services team, and that's helped us create some efficiency across the customer services team as well. So The increase would probably look considerably higher had we not been working on this for probably the last 5 years. However, we have been, affected by, obviously, wages have increased considerably. Electricity, all of our pools within council now operate on electricity. Our gas usage in Cromwell has come back considerably. We are hopeful this year that the new technology to heat the Cromwell pool will work as it should. We had the final bit of that innovation going just in the last few months, a final coil going, and we're currently not operating on any gas at the Cromwell pool now, so fully through electric. So we're hoping that that will hold all the way through the winter months too. So obviously electricity has still increased, and so we're not immune to that sort of 40% increase that's there. Just another couple of pieces that are in there. There's conversation about Miniatoto having a $200,000 grant towards a new turf that would be done beside the old one, essentially. So that isn't a decision that's been made yet, but we have included that in the numbers that are in front of you. Then just, I guess, our maintenance and renewals, where we could potentially get away with not having to do things. An example is, there's discussions around the Cromwell Town Centre. We had some money in there to upgrade the playground that's up beside the Cromwell Town Centre, just moving that out while we, understand that project a little bit more, moving that out a year or two. And then just, I guess, making sure that when we're maintaining things, that we maintain as efficiently as possible. And there are some things that we can't get away with. So our pools are aging. The pumps and compressors there are starting to show their age. We've got an aging irrigation system, especially throughout Cromwell, that's probably beyond its life expectancy. So, there are some areas there where we couldn't make savings because things are just breaking, and, that's going to be part of a larger project that we plan through the LTP on what some of those renewals look like. And then the last piece there, you guys will remember sort of towards the end of last year, we trialled doing some late starts for council on our quietest sort of council office days. And given we tried to reduce our impact on community as much as possible, our staff meetings are held outside of office hours. So after sort of that 5:30. So, and I guess across community experience, we have roughly 100 full and part-time people. So, it does affect a lot of people. And one of the things I'd like to propose, and, it's an operational matter and we can make this decision ourselves, is to move 1 day a week, starting opening council offices essentially at 9:30. Now, some councils around New Zealand do this. It means that our staff, especially for the ones that work a 40-hour week, it is included within their 40 hours. And you're not having to pay them overtime or anything like that. So all other days would remain the same, still, 8:30 till 5 as council, except for Thursdays, which would allow staff and all the activity managers, everybody that we see here, come in, upskill, train our staff, and we do have regular meetings that has no direct impact to council costs. We'll just have to ask the community for some patience with us on that day to start it an hour later. So yeah, I guess in summary, all of our frontline operating things haven't been immune to costs, electricity, wages, chemicals, diesel for mowing lawns, the chemicals that we're using for spraying, all of those kinds of things are going up. We have been leaning as hard as we can into our system thinking methodology, which is council's, I guess, operating methodology on doing the highest value stuff for the community and not doing the lowest value stuff, essentially. And so we have been leaning into that as much as we possibly can to try and keep this down. And I guess with all that hard work over the last sort of 5 years, it's, we've been able to keep it down as much as we can, but like everybody else, the costs have come through.
The community vision, as you would have seen from the earlier slides, it's not one of our big massive cost drivers. So there's not a whole lot in that budget that is to stand out really. The only thing to note really is that the round of community boards, there might be some increases to grants, so we'll know that it'll be a decision and recommendation from those boards. So that's really the only point. And to be fair, even in looking at what has been proposed, it's relatively minor, but that will be decisions for those boards to come to you in April. Any questions on either of those two activity areas? Okay, so the corporate corporate and governance budgets, that covers the governance, finance. It also includes HR, health and safety. It also includes the CEO cost centre. So I'll just start off because the increases really are in my areas. And the corporate side of the business, so that's the insurance that we've talked to you guys about beforehand. I'm going to go and have another look at that insurance budget that we have got in there. We currently have $1 million in the budget for insurance, and I'm just going to take another real close look at that. It did come in just under, actually we're about just under 900 last year, so I don't know if there's a whole lot of room to move there, but I'll take another look at it. Audit fees, which we've got no control over, have increased significantly in the last few years, so obviously we've put that in.
So increased, but so 35% in a sense, so we've got
Yeah.
to what?
So they are now about 180, I think, for that, about 180,000.
$180,000 a year for auditing of our annual plan, long-term plan, which one it is,
Yeah.
and our annual report.
Probably only your annual report and the plan doesn't get audited.
No.
And I suspect your long-term plan will be higher.
Yeah, we wouldn't have had that cost yet from them. I guess we put it out.
So 180,000 just for the annual report.
That's right.
Are they writing it as well? Is it a document?
Neil, it's a workshop, we've got to relax.
Let's just ask a question.
It's right, it's fine. It's significant. We're here today.
So unfortunately, we've had to put in the budget. The other thing driving the cost increases in this series of budgets is the information services licenses. Everything has gone up in terms of those, and also cyber security is your cost drivers in there. So one thing, I think we've looked through these budgets, there wasn't much to carve out, but I have put a little note there on my one. We have obviously had a slight staff decrease with the good agreement we've now got with Waitaki. We're not talking big figures here, but we have adjusted the staffing budget down because we're only paying it for a full-time person there. And the other thing that we can do within the IS staffing is that we can capitalise some of the work that is happening. So we have ran that through the model, which is going to drop some of the IS overhead that's passed on through the capitalisation. So that's my area.
How big's the CEO's?
Sorry,
How big's the CEO's sustainability budget? How big was it?
That was $80,000. And that's just been a line item there since before 2021. And I remember there was a conversation around this table with the carriage board when I first started this role. And there was a lack of clarity as to what that budget line was for. So obviously Peter's taken a good look at that and has decided that.
Gonski.
Yeah.
Gonski, see you later. On your bike. Going to Peter.
so I just want to go back to the annual report.
Done.
So a conservative rate of $150 an hour, that's 1,200 hours work.
And that includes all the
30 people per week.
disbursements and
With the plan, we'll
all of those
build plan.
How can we challenge that? You can write back to them,
Yeah.
you're wasting your time.
Yeah, I know. I guess to me, it's one of those things that needs to be understood by not just us, but
The ratepayer.
the ratepayer as well, saying the cost of, in this case, compliance, which is a big one, is not insignificant, is actually huge. And we heard Julie talk before about, what you do in terms of our testing of our wastewater and our water and all those compliance related costs. And there is a huge amount of money being spent on that stuff there, and to think that, even if it's $300 an hour you're paying, it's still 15 people for 40 hours that are doing that work. And I don't know if I've seen 15 people, is that many, but it just seems a heck of a lot of money, but we just need to make sure that everybody here understands and what it means, so that the cost of us being a business.
So what are we beating ourselves up at a 25% rate rise and all these costs are coming up on every slide and got nothing to do with what we're doing? Or the staff or anyone else in council.
I think the key thing is we're not necessarily beating ourselves up. We've got to go to tell the community saying, this is what's happening and this is why.
And they'll have that in their own household businesses and houses as well, so they understand it.
Yes.
Thanks.
Another big key thing we've done, and I've got HR, legally it's only against it, but it goes across the whole organisation. The decision that's been made by ELT is not to fully fund every position. So at any one point in time, this organisation has always vacancies, 14-ish at the moment. So what we are doing within the budgets is reducing the staff line down and taking a little gamble that we will never be fully staffed. And obviously, if we're getting close to that line, we'll need to make a decision around holding some vacancies and not appoint it. So that's a new thing that we're proposing for this annual plan, is not to have 100% of all the positions funded.
I just want to, I do want to put a cautionary note there. So there is a risk the organisation is taking, because we know what's happened with salaries, at least over the last 2 years. You will not be able to replace a person at the same level that you were paying them. It's just not happening in today's market. So there is a risk the organisation is taking. That's where you cover that risk, where you go, okay, when you bring budget 100%, you kind of mitigate that. So it's a good trial to do though, and in a tough time that we've got here, and to back with that.
We will have to closely monitor our FIRSX budget just to see how close to the win we're getting. But, it's a risk that we need to take because, that line is quite a big line in our cost. And so it's, to take 5% risk, there's a bit of savings we had in the bill.
It's a calculated risk, and a lot of times when you're carrying those vacancies, that's what we call it, take a calculated risk. And because you're not always going to be fully staffed, there's always turnover within an organisation.
It's a bit like the risk, well, not the risk, but it's the same sort of thing as you haven't fully budgeted for 12 months of maintenance and electricity supply costs, as Julie said, because you're only going to have X number.
Correct.
And then you get an increase. If this risk that we're taking doesn't work out, it just means that next year we'll be budgeting for more in those costs because we've been finding it didn't work in our favour.
Yeah, if morale goes up and more people want to come to Central Otago, then that's the outcome, we're looking for better.
But I want to get less paid than what we would otherwise get elsewhere.
Wow. We can start on that if you want. Where do we start? Hello, David.
Another thing that we've done across the organisation is reduce the travel budget. So again, the LT have taken a really good look at that. And while it's really still incredibly important to grow and develop our staff, we do have training lines, but we're really looking at things like Teams meetings where possible, reducing the number of people that might go to a meeting. So we're going to carefully monitor that, and we have cut all that back. You'll see, except elected members, there's not a huge budget there, but there are requirements for the mayor and particularly to go things like LGNZ and stuff. So we haven't taken the axe to that one, but we have across all the others just taken a good look at that. We've also done some rationalisation of things like stationery in our organisation, and we're going to centralise that under customer services under David, and we've looked at the actuals and saving about 30,000 by doing that and having that centralised. So they're the kind of things that we'll be looking at the organisation.
Has your travel budget reduced in the last 6 months?
Not in the last 6 months, but we will be reducing it.
So we'll get the money at Toto, we'll only get as far as home account. Well, if you only seen one of you, it'd be a humble soon. That's all right, it's got me over here, Julie. Yeah, right.
I think that the important thing in what Saskia's just outlined is how closely everybody has looked at the budget. So really, we're talking about 30,000 in stationery, talking about 45,000 maybe in travel budget. So it is a really close look at where is it that we can cut it, apart from the big areas, even in the little areas. So there has been a lot of work that's gone, and it's not easy to shave off 10 million from budgets.
Some of the lines about $120 in the Nigel as well.
Sorry.
Some of the lines about $120 that would look at.
You've been listening along.
On myself, before we move on to the executive.
That's just the cost of running business, isn't it? That's what we call it, Paige?
Definitely with IS licenses, because, you know,
Yeah.
that's the standard now. You get a mobile solution, our staff can move from anywhere in New Zealand. But the cybersecurity costs that drive the protection of our back systems is significant, you know, so all businesses are facing that particular issue.
To that point, it is pretty much this budget and the increase is just the cost of doing business, all of it.
Yeah.
That increase is the increase that is coming through. It's nothing added on top.
Okay, on to me, roading, so that this is quite a large proportion of rates, and so there's a couple of big items in here. One is the Little Valley Bridge component renewal. It's been assessed and it's identified that if we don't deal with it, there is some risk here. And if the bridge does fail, what we'll face is we'll still be doing the same level of repairs, but we won't be planning for that. A chunk of this cost is around forming an alternative route, and as you know, this bridge services the Lookout Estate residential subdivision, as well as some farms that have farm machinery, stock trucks, and as you've heard, wastewater treatment plant and removal of sludge. So it's a pretty key access to those communities. And the other big one is the Ida Valley Overcard Road rehabilitation. This has been deteriorating and we're spending quite a lot of money every year on patch up. So this is the time we need to do this road. Otherwise the increases in repairs will be, quite significant. In general, the budget shift has been from a silver scenario to bronze. We have focused on bridge maintenance and silver renewals. And in terms of, so I've talked about the Little Valley Bridge, but in terms of silver road and servicing, we've got the budget at the minimum level. Often tells us where we won't strike a backlog and resales. And at this point, this is the minimum we can do to get a return on condition and deliver a forecast. So we also have a significant reduction in CapEx. We've gone from 5 million to 800,000, and we've moved out a number of things and basically maintained speed limit signage, small safety projects, and the completion of the work in Clyde. So there's a lot in there. Is there any questions on that?
But did we not propose early on that we'll go to the silver scenario rather than bronze?
We did, but we have looked at this really carefully and looking at every saving we can make. And we think that we can go to the bronze scenario, we can manage the risk for that. There is a lower level of service.
We're not doing exactly what we're trying to avoid and then push that can down the road as far as all that other stuff.
So I think by continuing the investment in the seal, we're not doing that. But we won't have a safety issue, but there is risk.
So every market cost center, every cost center we have in the transport space, we've gone through around where can we take risk and where can we not. So the silver scenario is being held up around that all maintenance and renewal need for bridges and sealed roads. So if we take risks on sealed roads, we end up with the risk of rehab required, and the rehab is we're trying to protect our pavements. With the bronze scenario, it's doing the current level of service and maintaining our level of service for our customers. But we are taking some risk around events, the amount of snow clearing, the amount of spraying, different things like that. If it does increase further than what it is currently now. But it is sort of our minimum level of investment to maintain.
But I guess the question is, are we frightened to go back to our silver level? Because in the overall budget, 5 million is 10% of the rate. 5 million is only a nitrogen fixing plant and a water treatment over 30 years. And we're running, the real risk is we're running all of that deferred maintenance and building of new bridges down the line, and we'll face this issue in 5 years' time, and we'll need to go back up to $5 million.
So no seal road impact, no bridge impact in this scenario. So that's just going to what we really need to focus on. And there will be opportunity. We're not going to know where Waka share is until after we adopt this new plan as well. And we'll have an opportunity through our LTP as well to relook based on the Waka share. So it's an opportunity to focus on what we need to deliver around our bridges for the first place. Keep maintaining our pavements and the required reseals, and keeping other budgets where they're largely at the work described out in or the previous improvement, and then we can have another relook through the LTP. But we have gone back and made sure that we will keep delivering what we need to deliver at that bottom line.
So the reduction is around, gravel roads, drainage and footpaths. So as PP said, focus on bridge maintenance and seal roads. We've had a really good look at this because across the organisation, like we've tried to work out where we can make cuts, and we clearly have put a bit of effort in here, but
I guess the risk is, are we bold or are we frightened? Because if we're going to tell us the 24% or 25% or 22% rate cut or whatever rate rise, are we making, wasn't that long ago, are we going to make bold decisions for the community? Because we can still deliver some of the stuff with a big rate rise.
Can I just clarify something? Like, when you talk about 5 million of CapEx, it's largely around the improvement program.
Correct.
So you're not cutting all your renewal programs, you're cutting the improvement program you're going to do. So one of those was building the Alexandra Bridge and the Hyde Bridge and a new footpath down here for Sultry Street, and
Correct.
not your renewal programs.
Absolutely not. So
It's the add-ons that you're cutting out, not.
So we're still maintaining budget around ribbons and gravel roads. We're still doing reseals. We're still doing signage and everything that's needed, our drainage renewals, and our structure component renewals as well that were identified through that work that we've done over the past 18 months to years.
So the area that's pushed out, if I can just tell you, seal extensions at intersections, new footpaths, cycle paths, curb cut downs, the Alexandra Clip on, Sarwood Murray Terrace roundabout, realignment of Murray Terrace, development of Link Lane and Cromwell Town Centre, and the Molly Seal extension. So they will be addressed.
So we haven't reduced the levels of service, we're just not increasing them.
Yeah.
That's probably a key thing to concentrate on, that
I caveat that slightly with the fact that we are probably taking a little bit of risk around inflation, and different things like that, but it's minor in terms of seal pavement maintenance, a $26,000 increase. The unsealed pavement maintenance is a $9,000 decrease. So from year 4 of the previous long-term plan, so there is some risk around not fully accounting for inflation, but
If I could just add to the government policy statement signalling a government change in direction in what they will fund through their NZTA budgets. And so those cycle projects were unlikely to be funded as were the seal extensions.
Yeah.
So you probably wouldn't be cutting them out later on anyway.
I guess the other thing that goes into is that while we're doing that for the 24, 25 annual plan, the stuff hasn't gone away. And eventually it's going to come our way.
Yeah, everything will be recast
Yeah,
in the LTP.
That's the key thing to bear in mind, is that as painful as this annual plan is going to be,
This 1 year.
for 1 year, the year 1 of the LTP is probably going to be equally.
Yeah.
painful.
The
Also,
pain isn't gonna go away.
No.
I guess to that point that was raised earlier, what the team is saying is that we are not taking undue risk. We're taking some calculated risk here to reduce the cost for this year, and that is not going to mean that you're going to have huge maintenance problems coming next year. And so
Delaying the inevitable.
that's correct.
Not you.
I guess.
We've been doing that forever. We've been doing that forever.
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing what we do.
Well, there's nothing like good disaster to fix a few problems either.
But I think
Shut
I
up.
reiterate what
Let's
Vic
not
says,
discuss it.
it is calculated and we're
Yeah.
not causing the back of.
Yeah.
The, on that point about very soon you're going to get into your long-term plan discussions and they're going to be equally hard.
Yes.
So, I think it's important for the community to understand that as well. We're trying to alleviate the pain for 1 year as much as we can, but there are bigger conversations that are coming around, all of this. Once again, across the country.
2 scoops of ice cream costs more than 1, and not twice as much. We have 3, you pay a lot more. Depends how much the ice cream, I suppose. Waste.
So under waste, which I think we've got all the environmental services in your charts, whatever it was. We are experiencing an increase of 8% in the contract. We can't do anything about that. We also have a waste levy increase of 20%, which we can't do anything about that. We've got a couple of compactors that need renewal and our project at 4 company each. And we've got the organics processing plant at 1.45 million in the end of the year.
Why do the compactors need both replaced the same year? And do they need replaced?
So compactors have a probably a 12 life. Both of those transfer stations have been operating give or take for 20 years, and they are at the end of their life. They're both at the end of their life. They're doing, they're nursing both of those compactors through and struggling, really struggling. If they could do them tomorrow, they will do them tomorrow. But yeah.
So to explain how you got to that situation a little bit, you had a build own operate transfer contract on your previous waste contract, where the contractor built the transfer stations, owned them and operated them, and at the end of the contract, the assets transferred to you. So they were trying to transfer you assets that were brand new, huge value. They were at the end of their life. So you haven't depreciated them because you didn't own them until the point you got them. But you've got things that aren't very good and won't last for a long time. That makes sense. Good for the last contract, not so good now.
It was taken to the landfill. Oh,
Organic processing plant, isn't that a whole?
So three waters, rolling waste, design for the areas of increase. That's where the increases are coming, apart from corporate overheads around, insurance and, audit costs and all the rest of that.
In the planning and regulatory area, there is less opportunity, but we've actually taken out the whole district plan budget, which is 70,000, and we're relying on carry forwards. And the reason why we've got significant carry forwards in this area is because of RM reform and how long that's taken. We haven't been leaping into a lot of the planning work because of uncertainty. So we've been carrying forward year on year. So we have over $1 million in there. So we've just zeroed out a district plan budget altogether and we'll manage within the carry forward. We've also got vacant positions that we're not budgeting, and they've been sitting in the area for a long time. We have been unable to recruit those positions, so we think it's reasonably safe. We rely on consultants at the moment to do the work, but we have been rating for those positions, so we've taken them out, and we will address that again through the long-term plan. The comment I'd make there is, in this environment, we're hearing of some consultancies who are shedding a few staff, so by the time the long-term plan comes around, we might be in a better opportunity to recruit positions we need. We'll just make the point here that we haven't budgeted for a parking officer, and this is a matter that comes up time and time again in Cromwell and to a lesser extent in Alexandra. And if you want us to put that in, you can, but at this point there is no parking officer. And
Care I do, I was going to say it too.
I just said that under my breath, but I wasn't saying it in a recorded meeting. Oh, okay.
I'm keen, it was good fun.
sorry, Speak up, we didn't hear you.
I said I'm keen. It was good fun. Good way to make friends.
One of the few happy typing officers.
Yeah.
She can't give out tickets.
And we've also done a broad brush increase in fees and charges, so we've been putting fees up overall in the planning regulatory space, that's 21%, but it's kind of a haven't done too much analysis on it, we'll do a full review in the long-term plan. But one of the things that makes this a bit challenging is the increase in corporate overheads fall into this space, and we've always got to be fair and reasonable in how we charge our fees and charges, so we've got to look at this very carefully. So we will do that in the long-term plan.
Louis, what is that as a percentage of revenue for the council?
Fees and charges,
Yeah,
it's in that pie chart, what was it?
yes and what?
Fees and charges and other together, because this council has that, is about 11 million. I think, together. Sorry, as a percentage of,
Overall revenue.
so overall revenue is 83 million.
What's it,
11
12%?
million of that is fees and charges and other. Sorry, my maths is a bit weak to be doing
It is, in here on slide 5, it's about fees and charges and other. Hey, Sarah, do what? As read, pay attention, you should have been too.
Sorry.
It's cool.
Thank you.
Could have asked me, could have told you.
So moving on to property, we've got a reduction in the CapEx program, so all of the earthquake strengthening and work on community buildings has been moved out into the long-term plan. And at that point, we'll have a good look at community buildings and come back to you with.
Yeah, and remembering the digitization discussion, well, one of the items on that is going to be halls. And are they digitized because, you know, that has a bearing then on what council may choose to do with them. So we'll have that discussion, then that will flow into the LTP.
Yeah, so that's obviously the better time to do that, but gives us some relief in the plan in terms of costs. Cromwell Memorial Hall, you will know about, we made a decision on that in February.
But I need earthquake proof for it.
We've got, no, it should be good, Stu, we've got 24 million, which is for construction, so that will see floors, walls, roof on, and that'll be early acquisition of the materials, so that we buy them at the right price, and that is the cost that is budgeted. Cromwell Town Centre, through the conversations around the Cromwell Memorial Hall, it was agreed that that would go into the long-term plan. So we have budget this year as, which is about 6 million. So we will carry forward a proportion of that, small proportion, which is about 350,000 in that order, to do the modelling and do the analysis that will enable us to put the Cromwell Town Centre project into the long-term plan. And there is also about, I think, 9 million in this year that in the annual plan year that we've zeroed out. So those costs will fall out of that cost in December. And there will be reports coming to the board and council just updating on where we're at with that as well. And the final thing on this slide is there was some discussion around 150,000 for housing. We haven't actually included it at that point. The discussion was more around affordable rentals. So we haven't progressed that, and it isn't in there. You can tell us if you want us to do otherwise.
I think in the current climate, even though I was very passionate about that project, we just don't have the budget for it, unfortunately.
Agreed. Definitely.
Okay. So that's your direct costs within activity areas and where the increases are and where they're coming from and what we can or can't do about some of those. Overheads. Saskia's already talked about corporate overhead, so we won't spend too much more time on that. We've had a good talk about depreciation. So that's a combination of course, your capital works and also just the value of the assets going up, and that's what's causing the increase in depreciation, interest costs. And we've talked about that too. So that is your picture of expenses overall. Next one. Just a little bit more time on capital and the impact of this on your operating costs. Comes from depreciation and interest costs of your capital works. Not so much your year one works, so not so much what you're planning for. So 69-70 million of capital works is what you're planning in the year ahead. It's not the impact of that, it is the impact of what you've got either in your annual plan or what you have agreed through the year, which is showing through in your revised forecasts. So that impacts your planning year's interest costs and depreciation costs. And that's why we've got to be quite tight on what is planned, what is now forecast, and how is that going to impact depreciation and interest. The very complicated thing about local government financials is the interplay between depreciation, reserve funds, internal loans, interest costs. And it is complicated. Compounded by the fact if you're not clearly separated what your operating surpluses are from your depreciation surplus. So every year you budget, you'd be close to being God if we could all budget perfectly. So we don't. We budget as we know, we get to actuals, there's overs and unders in different areas. If you're budgeting right, you'll be roughly a little bit over, not too much. Invariably, there'll be an operating surplus overall for CODC Inc. In different areas, we have different things. That's your operating reserves and your operating surplus that you will carry through. And hopefully utilize that for one-offs that come at different times. So some cost has come up, you didn't budget for it, you use your operating surplus. Depreciation goes into reserves as well, should ideally go into a separate depreciation reserve, and you only use that for capital works. If you haven't separated those two up clearly, which is the case here, then you're not very sure which reserve you're actually using.
So what we paid to pay for?
That you would do anyway, but the bigger problem is you're using something that you have funded for longer term investment into your operating investment. That is the bigger issue of not keeping it here. So there is a bit of work to be done in that space. But that is what is the impact here. And so that's why we've had a close look at revised forecasts, seeing whether or not we will be able to complete this work, or we will be able to complete this work by the end of this year to 30 June, should that be reflected here and therefore reflected into interest and depreciation costs. It's a bit complicated, so please feel free to ask. There is any questions there, but we have looked at that and that has brought about some changes to the numbers. So there wasn't 10 million to cut out of operating budgets just like that. It wasn't like we had excess budget sitting there to that extent, even though there's been some really good work in, nearly $1 million coming out of planning and regulatory, and close to 200 million, 100 million, gosh. Sorry.
We did start very high. I cut twice. That's a simple day.
So-
What you get with your third week?
There's not much left to prune.
Lily, did you want to say something?
So I was just wondering, like, anticipated development contributions, can they be budgeted on all of income?
They are budgeted reserves, and they have been increased with the numbers. So there are a few other areas that have had a play, including development contributions. So Julie has looked.
I'll explain what's happening there. So, we looked at a complete recalculation, but we can't recalc. We can look backwards and we can look at this year and put new numbers in for what it's actually cost us to do things in the last 3 years plus what we're proposing this year. But for beyond that, we can't change the numbers because we're legally required to consult on the long-term plan to change those numbers. It's resulted, if we were to change the actual contributions this year, we would have big shifts up and down for a year, and then next year, when we get the forward work program further out, and they'd flip around the other one, and it would upset people massively. So what we're recommending is that we leave the actual fees that as they currently are. We apply the inflation provisions we're legally allowed to provide and include, and that we've recalculated and reforecast what the income's likely to be based on the growth rates that are actually occurring. So that's resulted in increased revenue for next year without big ups and downs in the next year.
98% DCs and over this current year, just by doing it.
I will flip back at the end of this back to your revenue slide right at the start, because we only picked on rates increase there. It's probably important for you to look at the other areas, because there is a conversation, not for today, but for your long-term plan to have in those numbers in there. And the one thing I want to say about other revenue sources, like DCs, is that they are only used for capital works in particular areas. So you can't, the interplay of that with your rates is only to the extent of internal loans and internal interest.
What we do try to do is, if we know we've got good DC income coming, we look at our capital programming relative to that. So, you know, we've got DCs coming in and we've got reserves that we're allowed to spend on those projects. We can accelerate those projects if growth's even faster. And so we let those projects in because we know that they can be DC funded without putting us into debt. So an example of that's the Cromwell nitrogen.
But are they enough? Well, I mean, I guess, are they a regulated figure that we can play with, or are they enough? Because we're facing.
There's a lot of just.
Yeah, that's my question I'm asking.
Take Cromwell's DCs and use them for rent release or upgrade. You know, just.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is that inflation and interest are affecting the cost of the development contribution to us.
So
the
They will also affect the capital works program, so that is taken into the calculation.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, is it not a mechanism for income streams forward by council?
Only to that point at which we're going to spend that money on actual work.
But we don't know what that true actual cost is when we set our development contribution, because lots of bridges have gone up 38%, but we wouldn't have. Well, I guess I'm saying if we can put it up by 38% now, if we've had the same increase in the last 3 years, this inflation thing and cost of business isn't over. In 15 years, what does it look like to replace the same bridge in Little Valley?
DCs aren't going to replace current infrastructure.
No, no.
DCs are for future growth.
We've got them high enough, that's what I'm saying. Well, and that's the work we're going to have to do. The LPP for the
To
development.
me, I'm a general, right against the CFD.
Yeah. So, I mean, for now, we're doing what we can. The LTP process will enable us to explore that. Then we actually have to go and consult on the DCs anyway.
Yeah, and for me, it's.
Was that as part of the calculation for the DC, it actually reflects back on what it actually cost to do the work in the last 3 years, and it puts it up like that. So it does.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm hoping that we're in front of the curve, as it were.
And I'd say also the other good thing is that we have been collecting DCs for a lot of years now, and other councils haven't necessarily, because they were seen as an impediment to growth. But we have been, I don't know how long we've been collecting them.
And I guess the only thing that makes all this better is we have coming down our channel growth. So if we can tweak DCs, and if the bridges and roading and waters told us that there's massive inflationary aspects in every part of that, whether it's design, whether it's product, whether it's distance isolation, it is a chance for us really in the next 10 years don't go on here, of having growth and increased DCs, which will help us pull out of the swamp we're in.
And you can use DCs to some extent for your improvement projects in water and wastewater, because you can fund the growth component out of it.
Yeah.
But you won't get much DC income for bridges.
No, but I mean, it's all part of growth.
Yeah, I think that point that you're raising is very valid, which is what are all of the revenue sources and have we optimized them? That's your point. Isn't it? Have we optimized DCs? Have we optimized fees and charges? Have we optimized any other grants and subsidies? And there is some conversation and you need to relook at your other sources. Not so DC's work is happening. We know that. We probably do need to, and I was going to talk about this when we came to, your revenue sources, is one area that you do need to look at, which you do anyway at every long-term plan, is look at your balance in your revenue and financing policy that says how much comes from rent, how much comes from fees, how much comes from DCs, etc. And perhaps there is a conversation there about, are the fees enough? Do you need to raise those to a certain extent? They're certainly not going up by the same extent as your other costs are going up. That does mean that a swimming pool, I don't know, what's your dog registration?
Don't you?
There you go. It could be that when you relook at that number that it throws out is something close to $100. And then you do your balancing factor that goes, are we going to increase the fee from 55 to 100? Or should we do a stepped approach or what have you?
Can I just add in there on dog fees? They're not rate funded at all, so you don't need to worry about that. It's purely funded for registrations.
I just want to say yet.
Yeah.
So that is your conversation to have, is to look at it. And there are councils, so this council, like you're saying, you've got 100% user pays dog fees, right? Upper Hutt is an example, is 80% user fees, 20% rates, right? So,
And 150 user fee.
Yeah.
150 registration.
And-
Get rid of them.
yeah. So,
Dogs, I mean.
so,
Everyone's asking a dog, isn't it?
So I guess in the overarching split, you have to look at those things and, what does this mean and what does it mean for, I guess from an organization perspective, what I'm saying is that your costs have gone up, your rates have gone up, your fees are not going up by the same extent.
Like, not in the Kinley's putting there.
Sorry?
That's your bugbear, isn't it?
What?
That fees haven't gone up.
Yeah.
We were trying to hold fees, but we've got to change landfill now. Or
Yeah, well,
And you end up trapping yourself because then you can catch up.
yes, all I'm saying is that there is an area to look at. To the point you were raising earlier, you need to optimize all of your revenue sources. Is the only point actually, not at which level you're setting it. That's fine. That's what will come out. But you do need to look at it and make an informed decision as to where you want to go with it.
So isn't the easy and nefarious pill to swallow the general rate, and it allows us to encapsulate and average out all those others? Because if we're still going to put up with 22 or 3% and double the price of the pools, you're better off incurring that cost within as an internal subsidy. Because you get one lump sum and you go, well, that's in there, when he's screwing his nose up already, he's going to throw something in there. But we're better off in roundabout way having a higher general rate and incorporating the inefficiencies of whatever that cost silo is within that general rate.
Well, your fees and charges argument is more about the user has to pay. And to what extent you think the user should pay is your philosophical decision to make.
Yeah.
Do you think the user should pay 100%? Or do you think there's a district-wide benefit to having this and therefore it should go into the general?
Well, I think it's district-wide benefit to most of the things we do, we sit at this table.
Sure.
Because if every person swam in the pool and ran for that, it's $44 a ratepayer pays. Now, 964 people, 1,265 people in Minitoto, there's probably only 30 people that swim plus some kids. So they will pay that rate to allow that service to be equal as everywhere else. But if we doubled the price and it cost them $65 for every person swimming Ranfurly, you may as well leave the lid off it and go curling in the winter. Yeah, now, so, I mean, this is absolutely the discussion, but you want this discussion in 8 months' time, around the LTP, because you'll need this level of analysis. Equally, too, Paul's would probably be a discussion for digitisation. And that might alleviate 30 people, you know, but it is a discussion you have to have, but just not now.
I'm just saying that there are policy settings that dictate the fees, and you can do them at an activity level, which is what you do. You know, you go that particular activity, we're not going to touch it because that's got benefit or whatever. There's a process laid out for you. It's a 6-step process. It's onerous. You'll sit through all of that and you'll come up with your decisions around that. So I'm just saying that in the overall numbers, that's a really good question. What's your optimized level of different revenue sources? So when the next one, I think we're not, I don't know. I look at this and I start to squint, so I'm sure you all are. This is just.
Fine, though, he's got the best answer.
Right there.
Yeah, that's right. So this is really just, if you wanted to, you could look at your capital forecasts for next year and just see, you know, where are the areas where we're saying we're going to spend 70 million, but we know straight away you can see property and community facilities and see there's a segment there's transport, there's so that accounts for most of the increase. So this is really just to give you an idea of where it's sitting. Nothing more than that, actually. And it's super unhelpful to compare this to last year or anything like that, because of course you had different projects then and you've got different projects coming up. So I won't spend too much time on this unless you've got questions.
So just to clarify then with the CapEx projects, the biggest single driver they do is come back is interest costs and depreciation, but the one that comes to rates is really just the depreciation.
Interest comes into depreciation.
Yeah, so interest and depreciation, and then operating costs. And then often I think maybe we don't acknowledge and recognise the fact that when you build a new whiz-bang thing, the costs from the old clunker you had operating costs are significantly greater. And we concentrate on the capital side of things, and then fail to recognise it. I'll use that term. We probably fail to recognise saying actually that means going forward, the power bills for Lake Dunstan water supplies went from $50 a year to $5,000.
Yeah, so for example, the through life costs.
Yeah.
To maintain the Colonial Memorial, or the new one, will be significant.
Yeah.
As well as the depreciation cost.
Will be significant too.
Yes, so we've actually, doing a capital program for water now, going into the column that says consequential OPEX increase, and then we fire the question.
Also for you to know that whatever you're budgeting in your coming year for capital costs, do not have the interest and depreciation in the same year. Not directly, because of course you're not going to build everything at the start of the year. So you know, we apply some methodologies to it, and it comes on in the next year, and that's why your forecast this year, the current year you're sitting in, is the year that impacts your coming year. But it does impact your debt ceiling. It does also make a difference to what we say you're going to borrow next year, depending on what the business is saying it's going to spend. So there are those kind of impacts to it. Right, so this is really just summarizing, and then I think if we should, yeah, which is the next one, I think. Yeah. Let's do the next one. Yeah. Okay. So this one first, which is, so we did a big slash and burn on different things, applied what we thought in terms of appreciation, applied the policies and rules we've already got in place, and then did cost cutting across the organization. And that was that reduction from what was a 46% increase or a 20 million increase to down to a 10 million increase that you are seeing now. This is one area. This is rough and ready work that John has done to go right, what's our depreciation cost funding and what is the opportunity that's still there? This is to the question, Councillor Stewart, I think you had asked this, can we do something with depreciation? So this is one of the things you could do. We've looked at where there is a reserve surplus. That's that first column there. And gone, okay, we are attaching some depreciation funding to this particular account, to that percentage funding. We think you've got discretion here because you've got reserve surplus. You could use that instead of funding depreciation. If you went half of what you're funding now, you could do a 327,000 saving. If you decided that actually we're going to zero this out because there's a surplus there, we're going to use all of that and not actually fund depreciation into that account. I hasten to add for 1 year only. So,
It's just probably the equivalent of about 1.2% in rates.
yeah, it will be roughly. So that's that. So you can go anywhere from naught to 655,000. And we just want to hear from you.
So the Mediatona farm, Wilson Road, has it got a surplus in its account? How? Because we've borrowed that money against that. And therefore, now we've changed our rules, or haven't changed our rules, that would be offset to the rate of the Mediatona ward rate, correct? Because it's community board owned land at the moment so that would offset a rate to the community rather than offset a rate to council. So we're setting the rates for council in this situation, correct?
When you're talking about that rates increase and the total value, that's right across everything. And then, yes, you're right, a portion of that will go into the different wards and flow through differently. So, yeah, you might be right. That might all, like we are talking about the overarching picture, but it might just affect that one that's not.
But to get that in perspective, that Manitoba farm is $1,400.
It says it's got an operating surplus of 137,000.
Yeah, but all that's proposed here is to, instead of 100% fund as we have to by paying 2,795, is for next year only fund 298. So you're only saving $1,400.
Yeah.
So.
Which over the whole lot, you've got there 327 percentage of the rate increase is insignificant.
That one is,
Yeah.
But the ones that drive are clearly stormwater, building control and central storage. I'm confused by how we would have a depreciation of building control. What are we funding in building control? Louise is looking at me to say, why are you asking me that now?
Yeah, we're intrigued by the numbers and they're not perfect.
Yeah.
We didn't mention it here before, we've got some work to do in our reserve accounts. So when Bert and Donna have looked at this, this is why we're not recommending the slash and burn depreciation at this point. That's why we're only recommending these ones that have got surplus numbers in there. But we need to have as part of the LTP, we need to really go through all this and understand that, and the way the money flows through the model hasn't been easy to figure this out to date, but it's on our hit list. So yes, there is some. When we looked at this list, we thought, that's a little bit interesting. But we can tell you though that there is surplus against those numbers. Whether there should be or not is another question.
Would it be reasonable to expect when this comes back to our council meeting that you're going to come and tell me why there's $2.83 million surplus in building control?
Well, it is a surplus in building control because you might have had more revenue in the last 3 years in buildings. And so what happened is, this is where I was saying, remember how I said you have operating surpluses in depreciation? This could well be an account. And I'm not surprised that building control is showing that actually. There are a lot of councils in the same space where resource consent and building consent had windfall gains because of growth that was happening. And I'm not exactly sure whether.
The person on the other side will say it's too expensive to get building control. It costs too much money to get the process there.
We had that conversation as well.
Yeah.
We just need to look into this and understand.
Yeah.
I mean, and take it through depreciation, I should know. But of what time frame are we taking it over, and at the lifetime of the effect, but likes of stormwater, and I don't know, and I don't know people are really going to tell us that, particularly bridges, I've been exceeded their lifetime. And are we still depreciating over that lifetime? What I'm making about depreciation is, say for example, stormwater. You're not really going to have to replace that stormwater for 30 years. But the actual technical side of it may say that a pipe only lasts for 20 years. 10 years makes a big difference. And that's probably what's got us over the road on bridges, because some of the Ministry Works bridges were over engineered 40 years ago. That
So if I could just probably put that theory to bed. Typically what we tend to do is overstate the lives because it keeps
the
the
depreciation
general
down.
depreciation.
Well, that's a
down.
question. That was
So
what-
it'd be a very rare occasion when we would understate the life.
but that,
Pipes, for example, I think we say they'll last 80 to 100
Yes.
years.
and
They're
that's
probably
what
not
I'm
gonna last 80 to 100 years, but if we could point to something, somewhere that says that that's the life, the auditors will check it off and we.
Well, we do that every year. Well, in our LTP, your depreciation rates for your
And
assets.
bridges, the same, bridges had a 100-year life.
I do want to say that, so you carry close to $1 billion in assets.
a billion.
I'd be hugely surprised if the auditors are not over it like a rash, because I do know that they look very closely at lives and costs that will attach to it, because that's what depreciation is based on. What they're checking for is that you are depreciating the full amount, and you're not suddenly saying this asset is going to last 200 years and they know it's only going to be 50, and therefore, your depreciation is minuscule. So they do put the rigor around that.
Engineers are pretty clever, right?
Yeah.
You talked a bit about this, just being the cost of doing business with nothing added on. Are there any additional risks to not funding that depreciation to the same level for the sake of 1 year, for the sake of 1.5%? Aside from the obvious one of kicking the can down the road to further generations?
No, we don't think so, because, and take this with that little bit of grain of salt that I said, there's an interplay between reserves, depreciation, internal loans, and therefore interest costs, right? Because we are seeing surpluses sitting in the reserves, we are saying that actually all you're doing is you're not funding it because you've got a surplus there and you're going to utilize that. And it's not huge in the scheme of things. It's 655,000 in the context of a 50 million depreciation bill. That's not a big amount. So no, you're not, but that, hence my caution that you only do it for 1 year and we do run that entire rigor exercise, which actually is not in our budgets. We haven't budgeted the cost of doing that work, which is not easy, where you unravel what's happening with your reserves and your depreciation and your internal loans. Because what happens is when your depreciation fund, you put that into a bucket for future use. But what do you do every year? You don't borrow to that same amount because you've got money sitting there, right? So you use that through an internal loans mechanism. And that's what your internal interest charges are. We've got to tidy up what's happening in that space. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying we need to tidy it up and everyone be clear about it. Certainly in my 3 weeks when I've looked at it, it hasn't made too much sense.
3 weeks. To move things forward for today and give you guys a bit of a steer, coming away today, there seems to be some depreciation expenses that we've got that we possibly don't need. So the steer that we could probably give you is just go and have a real close look at this, come back and tell us why we need to fund any of it.
Yeah, and look.
For this annual plan. It might be different for the LTP.
Yeah.
That's different. But just little things like saying, well, what even help our understanding? We say, how do we get surplus in building control? What are we depreciating in building control? Because it's vehicles. Then I thought in the end that the way the expense worked, that became a zero sum game anyway with our vehicles and depreciation work. But I think, is it useful to have the steer say, if we can save ourselves, $655,000 in this annual plan, I don't think there's any through the saving depreciation or not funding for a year, by better understanding what it's going to and what it actually is driving it, then go away and look at it, come back and tell us we shouldn't do it.
So we'll go away, we'll look at that, we'll look at removing that and see what that looks like and what the implications are of that.
saying to you that we're fairly comfortable that the reserves are the reserves
Yes,
there.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, so where did they come from? We can look at that, but they are in your books and they have been audited. So you're sitting there.
Yeah.
So if you're happy, we can take that away, we can apply that, and then we'll do further work for the LTP to tidy up the reserves.
So I
Stormwater.
think that needs to be something that you need to consider. We can't tell you to go and do that today, but come back to us with that having been considered. With some more work done that says, well, this is why you can take that out. Well, you might go away and do the work and say, this is why you can't take it out.
Leave it in.
It leaves it, but at this stage, it seems like a no-brainer not to go and have a real close look at it.
And you want us to apply, you want us to zero it out?
Well, that's right, that's right, start with that and tell me why it can't, tell us why it couldn't do that.
Yeah, and look, you can't on the stormwater without causing yourself great risk, and you might decide when we go to the next LPP too, that you don't want to build up huge depreciation reserves on three waters, given the continued state of uncertainty around operations.
Well, particularly the stormwater, because we know that while we push the lifestyle out, life expectancy, we're doing that in some ways. Probably been pretty vocal about it, saying, well, you're never going to upgrade the pipe, you're going to put a new one. You're going to only going to make it bigger, because it's actually not going to fail with what it is, and they're oversized from day one. So we're quite lucky to have them, and it should last us for a long time. The issue more with stormwater is where we haven't got stormwater reticulation. But I think there's an opportunity from guidance from today, so go and look at that and tell us why we shouldn't.
Just so I'm sure you'll all retain it in your memory over 8 months' time when you look at this again. I do want to reiterate that point, that reserves balance is a combination of operating reserves and depreciation. So there is very definitely an interplay of, there was some savings you did in a particular year, and that's gone into reserves.
But also there's, looking at the operating surplus and building control, some of it will be depreciation at $58,000 a year. Some of it's obviously operational expenses, saying, well, can we utilise that?
Yeah, I'm very certain, not 100, but maybe 90, that will not be depreciation funds building up in that reserve. That is operating reserves building up in that account.
But still, $58,000 a year depreciation for building control for what might be a few vehicles seems a lot.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
What, do we know what our asset value was in 2019, 2020?
Total asset values?
You'd have to come to the annual report. I mean, I'll pick that up.
Well, I guess what I'm making is if we've got $1 billion of assets, it was only 700 million the last time, we've done pretty well. To have an average, annualise the rate increase over the last 4 years. But that would, to me, as a business case, would be tracking pretty well.
Because your asset value increases from subdivisions being invested in you, as well as the work you do, as well as the cost increase of replacing those assets with few factors at play there.
Okay, so thank you for that. That gives us and that is not applied, so we can take that back into the numbers at 1.2%, but we're still doing a lot of tidy up, so don't know where it will wash up at the end. So if we go back one slide, thank you. Yeah, that one there. So just very quickly, overall, this is just really just summarizing this. We did a big increase. We have looked through even the 30,000s and the 20,000s. Actually, in some cases, like David said, there's $210 saving. Well done.
I do.
Yeah, so we can't do what? No other reductions are possible without actually changing levels of service. So that is that conversation. Those are a couple of consultation matters that will come here in April.
So, the grants budget on, I don't think that would reach the level of significance, but the red list walks to NCB. I've still been mind to put that through. That would be a consultation item for sure with the community.
So the add like 520,000 is 1%. So if you just bear that in mind, you're talking 0.5% there, but it's 200.
Yeah.
The Ranford one would be against the Minnetonka Community Board. It wouldn't be listed. Yeah, it would relate.
Yeah, and we're just modelling now different options for that in terms of funding and all that kind of stuff.
It would be yield related, but I just, because that came up earlier as well, your overall increase is 11 million right now in rates. So that is total rates. That might fall differently on different wards, but if you add 200K, you're adding it to that 11 million. So it is going to increase that by a percentage overall and then separately into that ward.
I think just what to be aware of too is that costs are sitting in that water or wastewater space disproportionately increased, then some ratepayers who get those services will be paying more than the average increase.
Yeah.
And then when I just found the levels of service change, it's really when you proposing to change the level of service, that's definitely consultations territory. That's an LTP discussion because you need to have a long lead in to work through the analysis of what does that mean. Unfortunately, time is against us to land this annual plan by the 30th of June. And so that way it's been really close. But if you were to propose any changes to this and if that impacted on levels of service, that discussion is best held when we do the LTP, because that's when we'll have the time to work through the detailed analysis of what that actually means.
Wayne, can we please go to slide 5? We've got numbers there. So we're going back. Yeah.
Revenue sources.
Yeah, just because the question was asked, this is just to give you an idea of your different revenue sources, right? So we talked about rates.
And could you just explain the growth component as well, how that makes a difference to that rate number we've got in?
Sure. So overall rates increases by 11,150,000 and 25.49%. That's the proportionality. So your total revenue is 83.34 million, and those are your sources of revenue. Rates, subsidies and grants, DCs, and contributions and financial contributions, fees and charges, and your listed assets. So you'll see to that question of DCs, that's gone up. Fees and charges have gone up. And the point I was raising is that that's gone up by 10%, rates gone up by 25%, so perhaps there's something to look at there. Now, when you do your rates increase percentage, and all councils do this, you look at what the rating numbers, your rating units, how much have they increased over the last year. The growth here in the last year is 1.2%. So you take that increase and you minus whatever the growth factor is, and that's your overarching rates increase. It's a bit crude, but what it is saying is that there's a larger base, so you're going to divide that increase over that larger base, and hence the minus it off. Yeah. So 1.2% is where we were sitting beginning of March. So that's what you take on. Yeah.
1.2% of growth.
That's right.
From March to March.
From June to March.
6 months, still about 9 months.
No. Yeah.
And our predictions of growth, do we have any of them in our long-term spatial plan?
We definitely do. We'll make an adjustment to where we think will be 3rd June. And as part of the long-term plan, Julie commissions a report on growth projections. But what we do when we set the rates, it's based on actual growth we've had in the last year. So we're really down to rateable units, and we're just over 15,000 rateable units.
So that might move slightly from the 1.2.
That might be, we're not expecting it to move much at all, but we will look at that prior to that.
So just to get that 1.2% of the increase will be funded by the additional rating units. That means that is that 25.49 minus 1.2.
That's right. Yeah. Or, yeah, it'll be funded by those revenue units, or the increase will be
Yeah,
spread
It's
across the
spread, yeah,
line.
yeah.
Yes.
So those have a corresponding decrease on the
Yes.
total amount of increase.
Yes.
And then as I think Julie pointed out, is that the key thing about this is that we all have to appreciate that the biggest drivers of that 25.49 minus 1.2 sit in probably Three Waters and Roding.
Yeah.
That then those that are connected to Three Waters will see a different increase than those that aren't connected to Three Waters.
Yeah.
So in fact, their increase may be more than the average, depending on what else they pay and how their values work and all those sort of things.
Well, and that's the sort of thing we have to model.
Yeah.
And
We have examples in our
consultation.
Yeah. Because so when you come back to us with the recommendation for the annual plan, we'll see those examples there as well. And I guess the thing is, it's saying that's the total revenue is going to increase by that much. That's the increase in the rates revenue. How it is divvied up will depend on what services you fund as a ratepayer. So for some, it's going to be less, and for some, it'll be more.
Yeah.
So I guess as of today, in that fact sheet, as of today, and it's subject to change as we work through the reduction, some of the stuff. It is sitting at about 24.29 if you take the growth component off. So that's where we are physically sitting right now on a potential growth increment. We need 24.29, 25.4 minus 1.2.
And then obviously we need to run through the model, but that direction that you just gave us around the depreciation could have us down
That's right.
23.
Yeah.
But
And I'm sure there's a
A few other things.
very good chance there'll be other stuff you'll find that could be plus and minus, who knows? Because this is not just the finish of it, but I think the key thing for me, or for the council, I think, is it's saying is that what else can we give you today in terms of direction or guidance that might help? Is there anything we missed? Is there anything we don't know about? You know, you're not coming and saying we're going to make a massive change in levels of service. Is there anything else that we're missing that you need from us? Is there anything else that councillors want to say, hey, this should be on the table?
Well, not from us. I think we've looked at, like that summary slide was saying, we've looked at all of the areas where costs can be decreased. So, you know, that's the likes of district line moving out. What are we doing with capital spent this year? Whether or not we do sludge treatment next year or do it later. So all of that has been looked at. We have looked at depreciation to the extent that we can, and internal loans. We'll do a bit more work around that and see if that throws up anything else. But roughly, that's what it is. That's where you are without too much room for movement.
Righto. Councillors, anything else you want to add into the mix? Melvin, what? No?
No, I just think it's the real chunk of it is that business as usual has gone up a lot. The water thing, we don't know where it's going to land. The funding, other than it's going to be across the item. And it is what it is.
Yeah. So just, yeah, because I do want to just quickly touch on consultation.
Yeah.
And what we've done, which is the last slide. Yeah, so you do have to consult because you're doing an annual plan, enhanced annual plan apparently. That's what we're saying that the consultation document will have. Are you comfortable with this? Other than that, if it comes to that consultation, don't think there is anything you can really, I don't think there are many options that you can do. To summarize that really well, it is about the cost of doing business has just gone up. So either we stop doing some parts of the business or otherwise. You can't stop water supply, so electricity costs will be impacted. You know what I mean? So there isn't a lot to play with. So there isn't really a question that says, do you want us to do anything differently? I don't think, unless you have suggestions.
I think it's critical. That's the message that we are putting out, that it's business as usual. that as a business, we have faced some incredible costs and increases. I think the other thing which is important to highlight is, as far as our rates are currently compared across the district, we're coming off a fairly low base.
Yeah.
And I think that's a point we need to get across too. I don't like the idea of asking our ratepayers for suggestions of where we can cut costs, because that'll just mean everybody in this building will have to take a 30% pay decrease, you know, because it's, I don't know if anything worthwhile will come out of that exercise.
I like the idea that, if no items to consult, I'll suggest a call for rate saving ideas. We've put everything that we can think of into the document, but that doesn't mean that someone hasn't got an amazing idea for, that hasn't been thought of.
I think that's the counter you said, Martin, is that you are going to get people saying, cut his salary first,
Yes.
the mayor's next, and then everybody else as well.
Yeah,
Councillors can do it for nothing at night time and staff people all overpaid. But we have the job of working through that.
Yeah.
The thing is, the gem that we haven't thought about that might come out of it.
It's got lots of problems, some solutions
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah.
I also think it gives the community their chance to have a say, so they feel like they're a bit more engaged in this consultation.
They have to say next October.
Well, I think also not just to say, but also they actually have, they realise the skin they've got in the game.
Yeah.
And they take some ownership of it themselves as well. They're saying, actually, I can't, even though I elected Stu to fix all my problems in the Manitoba, I can't actually expect him to do it. He's not Superman. I know that's his wife told me, so that's okay. But, you know, so that's why I think we should, you know, try and slant it in that direction and say that, you know, we really need some help. Because we haven't got all the magic bullets here, all the answers. And equally, I think the important thing that's in terms of the consultation is to say, this is this year. There needs to be, without doom and gloom, but saying next year, it may not be any better. There are going to be some equally as big challenges through the long-term plan process. And to say to people, so have a chance, you've got a chance now to tell us what you think, because it's going to come again at you next year and probably the year after and probably the year after. You know,
And to be fair, decarbonising the world and environmental impacts are hitting us like they're hitting everyone else. Water is major, urban and rural, and energy costs because of having to change the electricity from coal or whatever, that, right or wrong, are having a major impact.
anything else?
It's fun.
No, nothing from us.
All right, councillors, thank you. Well,
I
so
think I'd like to acknowledge the work the staff have put in,
would you?
because it has. Because,
Words out my mouth.
oh, okay.
Good shout.
Oh, I'll let you do it then. At the top of the table.
For a reason.
Yeah, all I was going to say is that there's been a huge amount of work that's been done to date, and there's a huge amount to come. I think we all, as elected members, acknowledge that the team coming together at late notice, some of you, to get us to where we are. It can't have been easy. It was certainly very challenging. I know Tim has been working closely with the team to work it through as well. So thank you for what you've done, and just go away and do more. And, and it'll be a job done and simple.
For 20%, I see you.
Mate, listen, but I do know. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this people was not in the job interview.
You did a
You
good
look like you can handle it.
Thanks, Dan.
Susan.
Thank you.